Good morning. Welcome to today's meeting of the Assembly Committee on Government Affairs for the 2025 legislative session. Will the Secretary please call the roll?
Assembly members Carter, present. DeLong, present. De Silva, here. Edgeworth, Flanagan, here. Gallant, here. Goulding, here. Gurr, Hunt, here. Jackson, Karras, Kasama, Wynn, and Chair Considine.
I am here, and please record Assemblymember Kasama absent excused. Welcome to the audience here in Carson City, those joining by video conference in Las Vegas, and those listening over the internet. I'd like to begin today with some housekeeping measures. Please check and silence your electronic devices. If you wish to testify, please sign in at the table by the door and provide a business card to the committee secretary. When testifying, please turn on the microphone and clearly state your name and any affiliation for the record. Turn the microphone off each time that you are done speaking. If you are providing handouts, please ensure that hard copies are available for members of the public. Electronic copies should have been submitted to our committee manager by 9 a.m. yesterday for committee members. We do expect courtesy and respect in our interactions during the meeting, even if we disagree with someone else's position. And I encourage committee members to ask questions and engage with the material presented. If you have any follow-up questions, please flag them for me so we can ensure that we balance our time effectively during the meetings. And committee members will be using their laptops to view handouts and other documents. Please do not interpret this as a sign of disrespect or inattention. And with that, let's get started. Today, we will hear two bills. First, we will hear Assembly Bill 242, which revises provisions relating to the Sagebrush Ecosystem Council. And then we will hear Assembly Bill 303, which requires certain projects to comply with provisions governing public works. I will now open the hearing on AB 242. To present this measure, we have Assemblymember DeLong. Please go ahead when you're ready.
Good morning. My name is Rich DeLong, and I am proud to represent Assembly District 26, which is located in South Washoe County. And I want to thank you, Chair and committee members, for hearing AB 242, which revises provisions related to the Sagebrush Ecosystem Council. Since this is not the Natural Resources Committee, and a number of you may be wondering why you're getting the opportunity to hear about sage grouse and the state's program to protect them. Well, at the heart of this bill is that it is a regulatory process bill, which is why I think it's in government affairs. And because it is a regulatory process bill, Ms. Kathleen Steele is here in Carson. She is the program manager for the Sagebrush Ecosystem Technical Team, otherwise known as the SET. And should the committee have any specific questions about the program, she may be the best one to answer those. So what is sage grouse? It is North America's largest grouse, and a grouse is an upland game bird. And the sage grouse, the greater sage grouse, relies on the sagebrush vegetation community in the western U.S. for survival. It is found mostly in Nevada, Idaho, Wyoming, as well as other adjacent states. In 2010, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service made a determination that the greater sage grouse species was warranted for listing as either endangered or threatened under the Endangered Species Act, but did not actually list it due to other regulatory priorities that they had. In 2012, Governor Sandoval issued Executive Order 2012-09 to establish the Greater Sage Grouse Advisory Committee, which was tasked with providing recommendations on policies and actions for development of a statewide strategy to preclude the need to list the species. And then following that, in the 2013 legislative session, the Sagebrush Ecosystem Council was created within NRS 232, and charged with the establishing and carrying out strategies for conservation of the greater sage grouse and the sagebrush ecosystem in the state. To that end, the council created and the SET implemented the Nevada Conservation System, or Credit System, which implements mitigation for projects that has an effect on the sagebrush vegetation community. Under this system, a project that has an effect on the vegetation community is evaluated to determine the number of debits it creates, and thus the need to offset or mitigate those debits with an appropriate number of credits. The system currently has what I would call a skeletal regulatory structure and is primarily implemented through agency policies. The intent of this bill, as amended, is to have the SET and the council go through a regulatory process to develop a more structured program that the regulatory community has the ability to provide input on and then can rely on as a transparent regulatory process. With that, I'd like to walk through the bill as amended, and then if there are any questions, I'd be glad to take them. So the bill's relatively short. It has two sections. In section 1, subsection 7, the word by regulation has been added to subsection E to indicate the intent to have a regulatory process put into place. And then subsection 8 is the new section which identifies the various steps in the regulatory process that needs to have regulations develop. And then a new subsection 2 has been created, which indicates that the bill will go into effect in January 1st of 2027. And the reason for that late date is to give the agency opportunity to go through the regulatory process prior to the bill's effect. With that, I'd be glad to take any questions.
So if the committee members have any questions, please let me know. I do have a couple, just because this is sort of outside what we normally see here.
Yes.
So my first question is, does that mean that currently the way the law is that the community does not have input? Is this bill the only way that community can have input in this?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Richard DeLong for the record. No, the regulatory community has been provided the opportunity to provide input, and the agency has sought their input in development of policies. I'm just looking to try and make sure that we have a structured regulatory process that the regulated community is used to working with the state agencies on going through. A regulation is drafted, it goes through a workshop where the regulated community and other interested parties are able to provide comments on those regulations. The agencies are then required to provide responses to those, which are then available for the public to see how the agency is viewing their comments and how they may or may not be incorporated into the regulations prior to the regulations being adopted and then going through the legislative commission for final adoption.
And that's what's happening now?
Thank you again for the question. Richard DeLong for the record. No, that is not happening now as it relates to the items in this bill.
Okay, thank you. And then just for clarification, I know you're using words like debits and credits, but in a very tangible sense, if you can give more of a larger explanation. So this is about the sage grouse, but it's also about the vegetation. So if there's something happening to the vegetation that can affect the sage grouse, is that the debit and the credit is to move the sage grouse or build another vegetative area in another place? Like if you could just explain how that actually works.
Thank you, Chair. Richard DeLong for the record. I'll provide an answer if it's not sufficient for the group. Kathleen Steele is here, who can certainly provide a much more detailed answer than I'm able to. It is primarily about impacts to vegetation, surface disturbance that removes the vegetation or otherwise affects the vegetation. The amount of that the location of that within the state relative to the how much the sage grouse actually uses that area determines the amount of debits. And then a credit is then purchased from another party, primarily located on private land, usually a ranch, that has dedicated their land to the conservation of sage grouse. And the amount of credits on that land is then quantified and it can be purchased to offset the debits.
Okay, I will give the next question to Assemblymember Goulding.
Thank you, and thank you for that explanation of the debits and credits. So is there also, when that credit is made that offsets the debit, is there any follow-up to verify that that credited land is actually being used by the sage grouse so that it's an effective credit?
Thank you for the question. Through you, Chair, to the member. Okay. Thank you for the question. Assemblyman Rich DeLong, for the record, Nui. I think it might be best to ask Ms. Steele to come down and provide some specifics on that if she's willing.
Hello, Chair. My name is James Settlemeyer, Director of the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. With me is Kathleen Steele. She is head of the Sage-Grouse Ecosystem team. In that respect, we can stand and answer questions. We're not for or against the bill. We can just provide information if you so wish. Would you like us to have questions go through you, or would you like us to go direct to a member?
You can go direct to a member. Thank you so much for your time and your willingness to answer questions.
Okay, Ms. Steele.
Kathleen Steele, for the record, could you please repeat the question?
Is there any verification process after the credits have offset the debits to verify that the sage grouse are actually using the credited land? That would verify that it was actually appropriate habitat and was a useful offset of the lost land, lost habitat?
Sure. Thank you so much for the question. Kathleen Steele, for the record. Yes, so there are follow-up visits once a credit project has been established. We do annual monitoring, 5-year monitoring, and then 15-year full comprehensive monitoring to ensure that the land is staying either as it was when it initially was analyzed or improving, and we generally work towards improvement. And then we partner with NDOW to do let counts in the area to ensure that there's either increasing or decreasing populations, figure out why. We also have an adaptive management process that if there is a decrease, what can we do to help? Maybe it's out of our control, maybe it's within our control. There are various things that we can do depending on if the population is increasing or decreasing, if the habitat is increasing or decreasing. It's very adaptive. We do have also like an uplift process, like a restoration process if things do go downhill or if they're just at the very start, not hitting a certain bar. We do work with our landowners to, depending on who the landowner is, to do improvements, habitat improvements on the land. To improve that, try to get the birds to come in that way, or give them a good spot that they can shift to.
Is there any consideration given to the continuity of land? So if you have an offset, so your credit is over here, your debit was over here, but this is an isolated island, is that accounted for in the overall calculation?
Yes, Kathleen Steele, for the record. Yes, that is accounted for. We have various things depending on what we're looking at. So if the debit project is over here and a credit project is over here, we prefer that the credit project be closer so that it's more of a continuity. We do increase, we have a factor that increases the debits the farther they offset them. So we really try to incentivize coming close to the debit project. But if it's an isolated area, we do have like a connectivity corridor that we try to manage through just to make sure populations are connecting. We try to improve that as well through mapping and modeling through USGS.
This is James Settlemeyer. Thank you for the question, Ms. Golding. You bring up an interesting point that happened a long time ago when it comes with the Department of Transportation. They learned that it wasn't right to necessarily, as you're getting at, having them too far apart. They tried to do wetland delineation on things that were happening in Douglas County in the middle of Washoe Valley. That doesn't necessarily help the birds. So we are trying to do our best to try to make sure to ensure that those happen closer to where the habitat may be lost.
Thank you. And the next question is from Assembly Member Karas.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the presentation. Love your answers. This may be for you guys also. It kind of ties into Assemblymember Goulding's, because for me, birds don't know you've moved them to a new territory, and you're connecting them with a pathway back to where you don't want them. What stops them from going back there?
Thank you for the question, Kathleen Steele, for the record. It's actually a very good question. Unfortunately, sage grouse are very site-specific. They do keep going back. They have high site fidelity. They keep going back year after year after year. Our hope is, especially if something's very close, to really try to eventually get the populations through many generations to start shifting if they find some area to just not be appropriate for brood rearing, for nesting, especially if something's been completely decimated. They'll still try to go back, but the hope is just to kind of shift them towards a better area. If not, at least improve another area so that that population can get bigger to offset the loss over here. So it's more of like trying to play a numbers game of trying to increase the population over here to offset what we are losing over here.
Thank you, Chair. I'm trying to find the words that I want to ask. So you're having, this land is debited, the land it's moving to is credited, I'm assuming, to a rancher or a farm or something like that. If the birds are moving back and it takes a while to establish, are the credits adjusted accordingly until it's a proven, you know, they're really moved here? I love the fact that you're finding a new place for damaged areas so that they can flourish, but I'm just trying to figure out how the credits and debits work, and that may be his answer. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for the question, Assemblyman Rich DeLong, for the record. That's a good question. I think the thing to realize that the program is primarily about managing habitat on a kind of a regional scale. And Ms. Steele talked about the concept of, you know, we're trying to improve it in one area because a project reduces the habitat in another area. And it's the program's looking at regionally, not this bird here versus that, trying to move a bird. It's more about managing habitat.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And seeing no other questions from the committee, thank you. Thank you so much for answering our questions about the program. This is usually not the area for that, but I appreciate giving the additional context. So with that, I would like to move on to testimony on the bill. First, we will provide testimony in person in Carson City, via video conference in Las Vegas, or over the phone. Further instructions for providing testimony on a bill can be found on the agenda. Each speaker will have 2 minutes to provide testimony. We will begin in Carson City. If anyone would like to provide testimony in support of AB 242, please step up to the table and begin when you are ready.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Nikki Bailey Lundahl. I'm the Vice President of the Nevada Mining Association. The Nevada Mining Association is in support of AB 242. We have been a part of efforts to conserve sagebrush ecosystems for many decades. We were proud to serve on Governor Sandoval's Sage Grouse Advisory Committee, and the industry has continued to play an active role in the conservation of sage grouse habitat through the Sagebrush Ecosystem Council. As you have heard, it is the efforts of this council and the Sagebrush Ecosystem Technical Team that created our market-based system for project mitigation. As the system has matured and the projects have grown more complicated, it has become clear that a solid foundation of how the credits and debits are calculated is needed. This will give the public, the regulated community, and interested stakeholders the information they need and the opportunity to provide input as these systems are developed and maintained. AB 242 is a necessary refinement to ensure that the state is on a solid footing to continue to see positive conservation outcomes for this program. Thank you.
Is there anyone else in Crescent City wishing to provide testimony in support of AB 242? Seeing no one approach in Las Vegas, is there anyone in Las Vegas who wishes to provide testimony in support of AB 242? Seeing no one approach, AVH, is there anyone on the phone in support of AB 242?
To testify in support of Assembly Bill 242, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, we have no callers wishing to testify in support at this time.
Thank you. We will now move to opposition. Do we have anyone here in Carson City wishing to provide testimony in opposition to AB 242? Please begin when you are ready.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Olivia Tanager with the Sierra Club, for the record. The Sierra Club Toyabe chapter stands in solidarity with communities across the state, human and non-human, in opposition to AB 242. We fiercely support the conservation of greater sage grouse and believe that the conservation credit system is a greenwashing spectacle that fails to help the sage grouse, causes habitat destruction of the imperiled pinyon jay, and destroys culturally significant ecosystems. You can't create sagebrush habitat out of thin air, and so what this mitigation tactic often means is clear-cutting pinyon juniper woodlands and attempting to transition the ecosystem to sagebrush. Pinyon jays and other important Nevada species rely on the pinyon juniper ecosystems for survival. Stealing one ecosystem to make up for destroying another is not mitigation at all, especially when there are no numbers or studies, at least that I have seen, demonstrating that sage grouse inhabit or lek in newly created habitat intended to make up for their lost habitat. Sage grouse, as you heard, are extremely place-sensitive creatures, and more often than not, when you destroy their lekking sites, they fail to reproduce, and flocks are locally extirpated as a result of the development. While we appreciate the attention to the rapidly declining sage grouse across Nevada, we cannot support this bill because it fails to create a system that would actually protect sensitive species across the state and further legitimizes a system that we have no evidence of working. Hoping the sage grouse migrate to a new area is insufficient for conserving sage grouse. In talking with old-timers about sage grouse, which is one of my favorite topics of conversation, they described driving across the Great Basin decades ago, and if flocks of sage grouse took flight, they were so great in number they would block out the sun. It's hard to imagine that today because of how much the sage grouse are declining and how rapidly. I've had the immense joy of seeing sage grouse lek in the spring, snow-covered mountains behind them as they do an ancient dance they've been doing for thousands of years, and it's getting to be that time of spring again. I don't know if my children will be able to remember seeing the epic sage grouse dance and feel the immense awe and connection to our great state that I did when I saw my first lek. At the current rate of decline, sage grouse are in the express lane towards extinction, and we must stop that from happening.
That is your 2 minutes. Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We encourage you all to oppose this bill. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair. I'm Scott Lake. I represent the Center for Biological Diversity. The Center opposes AB 242 because it fails to address fundamental problems with the state's approach to sage grouse habitat conservation. The sage grouse is in trouble. Over the past 15 years, since the sage grouse was found to be warranted for listing under the Endangered Species Act, the species and its habitat have continued steady decline despite conservation efforts at both the state and federal levels. Human activities like mining, energy development, motorized recreation, and livestock grazing continue to encroach upon sagebrush habitats. in addition to naturally occurring threats like wildfire and invasive species. The Center believes that effective sage-grouse conservation would be a win-win for people and the environment. An effective conservation program would preserve the landscapes that countless wildlife species as well as Nevada communities depend on, while avoiding a federal ESA listing and therefore maintaining the state's full authority over management of its natural resources. Compensatory mitigation can be a useful tool in working toward this end if it is properly utilized, but it's not sufficient by itself, and that's largely why the state's Conservation Credit System, or CCS, falls short. Nearly a decade into its implementation, the CCS remains a well-meaning but ultimately flawed approach to sage-grouse habitat conservation, and unfortunately, AB 242 does nothing to correct this. For instance, AB 242 doesn't require developers to adhere to the mitigation hierarchy, a widely accepted framework in natural resources management, which places the first priority on avoiding harm and the second on minimizing any avoidable harm. Under the CCS, there's no effective mechanism to incentivize avoidance or minimization, so many developers skip directly to step 3, which is compensatory mitigation. And because compensatory mitigation is never 100% effective, this leads to a net loss in populations and habitat. In some cases, the cost of credits might encourage avoidance or minimization, but the CCS fails to set a minimum cost for credits, and that thus fails to ensure that the costs of avoidance or minimization outweigh the cost of off-site mitigation.
Sorry, that is your 2 minutes.
Okay. Well, we encourage you to oppose this bill. Thank you.
Thank you.
For the record, my name is Clifford Benuelos. I am the State Tribal Liaison for the Intertribal Council of Nevada, working with the Nevada Division of Environmental Protection. I'm also a member of the Tmoke Tribe of Western Shoshone. The Intertribal Council of Nevada is a consortium made up of 28 federally recognized tribes in Nevada, and our board is composed of the tribal chairpersons from each of our member tribes and bands. Today I'm testifying on behalf of ITCN. ITCN does not support the language in BDR 18-214, also referred as AB 242, which revises provisions of the Sagebrush Ecosystem Council. Nevada tribes have openly expressed disagreement with the conclusions and remedies of the BLM and U.S. Forest Service Bi-State Grouse Action Plan, and in meetings in the past decade, including a summer of 2023 meeting with tribes in Minden, a May 9th and 10th meeting with tribes and the Nevada communities in Sparks, and at a May 3rd meeting between tribes and the 2 land agencies in Ely and Sparks to discuss commercial pine nut permitting. It has got to the point where ITCN passed Resolution 08 ITCN 25, which declares a state of emergency for pinyon pine. Historically, Nevada tribes depend on pinyon pine nuts as a sustaining food source. Nevada has been devastated by wildfires, drought, disease, and pests due to the increase in ambient temperature and encroachment of humans onto forest land. The destruction of our traditional food sources, in turn, losing an essential part of our cultural ceremonies and traditions like the gathering of pine nuts and the pine nut songs and stories that go with that, and teaching our young people our ways, will be adversely affected by the proposed revised provisions to the State Ecosystem Council. Further, destroying pinyon juniper forest also destroys pinyon jay habitat, and the pinyon jay is under consideration to be an endangered species. ITCN strongly supports members of the sagebrush ecosystem to meet with Nevada tribal leaders to discuss this topic before going forward with unneeded language changes that will adversely affect the relationship between tribes and the state of Nevada. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here in Carson City wishing to provide testimony in opposition to AB 242? Seeing no one. In Las Vegas, is there anyone wishing to provide testimony in opposition to AB 242? Seeing no one approach, AVH, is there anyone on the line for opposition testimony for AB 242?
To testify in opposition to Assembly Bill 242, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, we have no callers wishing to testify in opposition at this time.
Thank you. We will now move to neutral testimony. Is there anyone here in Carson City? Please go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. James Settlemeyer, Department of Conservation and Natural Resources Director. With that, I wanted to thank the committee for the time you've given to hear the bill. If you have any additional questions, please reach out to me or Kathleen Steele. We can try to give you more information about the program. It is incredibly complex. In order to be the head of a person who actually does the determination on credits and debits, it takes over 4 hours just for that discussion. We thought about bringing it here today, but we decided it'd probably be better to wait for another day. That being said, We are working with Assemblymen to try to resolve some different issues. We appreciate the amendment. We'll continue to work with them. Of course, there's always aspect of trying to figure out how we can reduce the fiscal note as much as possible. We're still trying to analyze that, and we'll get back to him and work with you to do so. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in Carson City wishing to testify in neutral? Seeing no one, is there anyone in Las Vegas wishing to testify in neutral on AB 242? Seeing no one, AVH, is there anyone on the line for neutral testimony to AB 242?
To testify in neutral for Assembly Bill 242, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Caller, you are unmuted. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm Jake Tibbetts. I'm the Eureka County Natural Resources Manager representing Eureka County. And I serve as the local government rep on the Sagebrush Ecosystem Council. Eureka County has been a part of the process to develop the conservation credit system from its inception, with the prior Sagebrush Ecosystem Council local government rep and chairman, J.J. Goycochea. So we do understand the desire to have a strong regulatory backstop for the conservation credit system while also having the flexibility needed in managing the sagebrush ecosystem and sage-grouse habitat. We just wanted to get on record that we're committed to assist in finding the right balance in this bill on AB 242, and will provide our services if needed. Thank you.
Thank you, AVH.
If you recently joined the call and would like to testify in neutral for Assembly Bill 242, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, we have no additional callers for neutral at this time.
Thank you. Inviting the Assembly member to come back up for any final remarks.
Thank you, Chair. Assemblyman Rich DeLong. For the record, thank you very much for the hearing. Appreciate it. I do want to point out that while I appreciate all the comments that were made in opposition, they primarily related to whether or not they believe the credit conservation system is the right approach. They really didn't comment on the content of the bill or what the bill is trying to do. With that, I will continue to work with the director and the program manager to finalize the text in the amendment and look forward to bringing that forward to a work session with this committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I will now close the hearing on AB 242 and open the hearing on AB 303, which requires certain projects to comply with provisions governing public works. To present this measure, we have Assemblymember Karras. Please go ahead whenever you're ready.
Good morning, Chair Considine and members of the Government Affairs Committee. I am, for the record, Assembly Member Venice Karras, representing Assembly District 10 in Clark County. We are here today to present Assembly Bill 303, which requires certain projects to comply with provisions governing public works. Generally, this bill provides that existing law governing public works apply to any project involving the development or improvement of broadband, telecommunications, or fiber optic services for which public money has been provided, and that it is sponsored, financed, overseen, or administered by a public body. Additionally, we are introducing an amendment to clarify when the requirements it sets forth are triggered to remove concerns about overly broad interpretations. At this point, I would like to turn it over to Andy Donahue to introduce himself and to discuss the impetus for the bill and its specific provisions.
Thank you so much. Good morning, committee. Andy Donahue for the record, Chair Considine. AB 303 aims to enhance transparency, accountability, and oversight concerning broadband infrastructure projects that involve public funding or significant government oversight. Given the increasing importance of broadband services and economic growth, education, healthcare, and public safety, it's crucial to ensure that publicly funded projects comply with established reporting requirements. However, as initially written, we recognize that AB 303 could impose every public works requirement on broadband projects that do not meet existing definitions under Nevada law. We understand there are concerns about the bill adding privately funded broadband projects, potentially discouraging private investment. To address this concern, we have a conceptual amendment to be considered by this committee. We're narrowing down the bill to only reporting standards that contractors are already fairly well acclimated to. The forms are readily available, they submit them routinely. The bill will only concern reporting standards and is not intended to add private projects that do not receive public funding to the provisions of public works law. Furthermore, because broadband infrastructure projects inherently span multiple jurisdictions crossing cities, counties, and state boundaries, we proposed the Board of Directors of the Nevada Infrastructure Bank provide a centralized location for these records during applicable reporting periods. This centralized storage promotes completeness, transparency, and coordination across jurisdictions for those records that contractors are, again, familiar with submitting. This bill is intended to direct construction contractors to provide certified payroll reports to the Infrastructure Bank, in addition to the destination where already directed by law. ISPs, internet service providers, and phone companies are not envisioned as construction contractors. Amendments to make this more clear are welcome. We acknowledge today's hearing focuses on the bill as originally introduced, but we wanted to be proactive and share this conceptual amendment with input from just about everybody that I had the opportunity to speak with thus far as a work in progress to address concerns and facilitate constructive dialogue. We look forward to continuing to engage with interested parties and returning to this committee with a refined amendment for formal consideration. With 2,500 miles of expansion and $900 million planned in construction, the intent of this bill is to provide accountability and transparency for public dollars. Chair Considine, we have an amendment that we could walk through or begin the conversation with some questions.
Please walk through the amendment.
Great, thank you. Andy for the record. Beginning with Section 1, the first and final line are struck by amendment to begin this narrowing process. Those two particular portions of the section were explained to me as sort of the key parts that caused the entire chapter of 338 to apply to this work when we're just looking for reporting. That's why we added Section 5 of NRS 338.070 to identify the reporting section of 338. That's where the record keeping is defined and enumerated. So we specified that's a section of 338 we're talking about applying to these precise projects. In subsection 2 of Section 1, we continue to call for reporting, and this is where we introduce simultaneously submitting a copy of the record to the Infrastructure Bank. So contractors receiving public funds already send it to perhaps an awarding body or the local government where the work takes place. Also going to send it to the Infrastructure Bank. We introduced this concept to the Treasurer's Office some time ago. They were very perceptive, and we're glad to have them open to the possibility. And Section 2 of the amendment before you at this time are a combination of codifying changes and input from telecom companies.
for two reasons. The codifying changes account for the simultaneous submission for these precise contractors doing broadband telecom work with public funding. And the other amendment to 338.011 explicitly exempt funds awarded for the development of contracts awarded for the development or improvement of privately owned broadband, telecom, or fiber optic services to not be public works. We're glad to make that abundantly clear. That section does it. I was glad to receive that as a great suggestion. And that is the amendment and what we're working on. Thank you, Chair Considine.
Thank you. Committee members, do we have any questions? My only question is, I think, more of a clarifying question. So in the original bill, there was a Section 1. In your amendment, there's a Section 1 and a Section 2. So all of Section 2 is sort of new because you're making amendments within Section 2, which is not in the original bill. Just for clarification.
Eddie, for the record, thanks for the question, Chair Considine. Insofar as it was a different section of the chapter, when we were putting this document together, we simply organized it as a second section since a different chapter that we were opening up to consider. However, if it's not drafted by LCB, it's I don't think it's good drafting, and I drafted this. So that's what you're picking up on there, Chair Considine.
Thank you. No other questions? Okay, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. We will move on to hearing testimony. Again, testimony can be provided in person in Carson City, via video conference in Las Vegas, or over the phone. And further instructions for providing testimony on a bill can be found on the agenda. Each speaker will have 2 minutes to provide testimony. We will begin here in Carson City with testimony in person. And please begin when you are ready.
Good morning, members of the committee. Tom Morley for the record. We are here in support. I represent the Communication Workers of America, as well as Laborers Local 872 and Laborers Local 169, and we fully support this measure. I think it's a transparency bill that is going to show us that the BEAD Act will be followed on suggestive matters like prevailing wage, family health care, local hire. Thank you.
Thank you and good morning. My name is Alexis Motorex with the Nevada Chapter Associated General Contractors, advocating for the commercial construction industry in Northern Nevada. Today we're here in support of AB 303. As many of you know, AGC does not support arbitrary expansions of NRS 338, but we have always defended its fundamental purpose, ensuring that public money spent on public land is used responsibly with a fair and transparent bidding process that delivers the best value and highest skill for Nevada taxpayers. Unfortunately, we've seen more than one middle-mile project in this state funded with public dollars being built on public land, where contracts have been awarded under NRS 333 instead of 338. This has allowed network providers to secure state contracts, then subcontract the construction work without the required public bidding process. We believe this practice undermines the spirit, if not the letter of the law, and creates an unfair advantage. This bill seeks to correct this loophole, reinforcing the integrity of our public contracting system. We appreciate this effort and urge your support. Thank you.
Is there anyone else in Carson City wishing to testify in support of AB 303? Seeing no one, we'll go to Las Vegas. Is there anyone in Las Vegas wishing to testify in support of Assembly Bill 303? Seeing no one approach the table, AVH, is there anyone on the lines in support of AB 303?
Thank you, Chair. The public line is open and working. We have no callers for support at this time.
Thank you. We will now move to opposition. If there's anyone in Carson City who wishes to testify in opposition to Assembly Bill 303, please approach and begin when you are ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Dan Morgan, and I serve as the CEO of the Builders Association of Northern Nevada. Founded in 1956, the Builders Association represents over 700 member companies and advocates on issues affecting residential development and home building across Northern Nevada. When evaluating proposed legislation, we ask a fundamental question. Will this bill help bring homes to the market faster and without unnecessary cost? In 2023, the legislature prioritized housing supply and affordability as reflected in Section 14 of AB 213, a bipartisan bill signed into law by the governor. That section states, the legislature hereby finds and declares that a consistent and robust supply of housing is an important factor in the overall affordability of housing, end quote. We are concerned that AB 303, as currently drafted, would extend the provision of Chapter 338 to all telecommunications infrastructure projects serving homes and residences, even those fully financed by private companies. Applying Chapter 338's requirements, including the prevailing wage provision, to privately funded projects will increase the cost of delivering homes to buyers and tenants. Ultimately, these added costs will be passed on to the consumer, further impacting affordability. For these reasons, we appear before you today in opposition of AB 303 as introduced and written. However, we welcome the opportunity to work with the bill's author and sponsors and other stakeholders to address our concerns and appreciate the willingness to consider the amendments. Thank you very much for your time.
Good morning, Chair Considine, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Nick Schneider, Director of Government Affairs for the Vegas Chamber. I'd like to echo those concerns. We do have some concerns with the overly broad nature of this original drafting, but would like to thank the bill sponsor for her willingness to work with stakeholders. We're still receiving feedback on the proposed amendment, but are looking forward to continuing the work with her on that process. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair Considine and committee members. Misty Grimmer, Grimmer, representing Cox Communications. We as well have had multiple conversations with the bill sponsor and Mr. Donahue on this bill, including the bill sponsor afforded me a few minutes just this morning, which I very much appreciate. We are still working on coming to agreement on this piece of legislation. There's still a little bit of concern around the sections that require reporting on private projects and getting into the details about what types of public funding we're talking about on these projects, because there's a range. So we very much appreciate the sponsor bringing this bill and look forward to working with her and Mr. Donahue on coming to agreement. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair Considine, members of the committee. For the record, I'm Michael Alonso, and I'm here on behalf of AT&T. I would first like to take a moment to thank the sponsor and the proponents for working with us on the bill. We still have some concerns about the overly broad language in the bill as introduced. We believe Nevada law is clear on how a public project is defined and how it's supposed to be administered. Broadband projects are privately owned networks and are not owned by a public body upon completion of the work. And therefore, we look forward to continuing the work with the sponsor and the proponents to try to clarify the language. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Considine, members of the committee. Warren Hardy today representing the Urban Consortium, here to speak on the original bill. We also have concerns about the broadness, but our concern also revolves around the reporting. One of the challenges we're having as local governments is getting companies to bid public works. And a big part of that problem is the overburdensome reporting and the other requirements. So we need to strike that fine balance between transparency, open government, which is extremely important, and we think the current laws regarding public works strike a pretty good balance on that. And so we continue to work. I have had conversations with the Assemblymember Karras and appreciate her openness and willingness to work with us on this, as well as the proponents, and we will endeavor to try to find some solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. Joe Hill, Policy Analyst with the Retail Association of Nevada. We have concerns with AB 303, but appreciate the sponsor for meeting with us, and we look forward to continue to work on the bill before it goes to work session. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in Carson City wishing to testify in opposition to AB 303? Seeing no one, is there anyone in Las Vegas wishing to testify in opposition of Assembly Bill 303? Please begin when you are ready.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Tina Frias, Tinafrias, and I serve as the CEO of the Southern Nevada Home Builders Association, known as SNHBA. SNHBA is committed to working with policymakers on solutions to help more Nevadans achieve home ownership. Unfortunately, AB 303 in its current form undermines those efforts and presents significant obstacles to attainable housing. AB 303 could add public works requirements, including prevailing wage, to residential construction projects. As written, if the project is sponsored, financed, overseen, or administered by a public body, it would be considered a public work. This means that simply obtaining a permit could trigger prevailing wage requirements, even for projects with no public funding. The current bill language includes privately financed projects to the requirement to maintain detailed labor records and submit them to the State Infrastructure Bank, even when only seeking basic governmental approvals like building permits. This would impose unnecessary and counterproductive administrative burdens on the builders. We hope for the opportunity to work with the bill sponsor on the amendment, as it would benefit from language that clearly distinguishes publicly funded and publicly funded projects from the ones that are privately funded and should not fall under public works requirements. AB 303 in its current form would drive up development costs, ultimately burdening consumers and worsening housing affordability. This increase would place home ownership further out of reach for many Nevadans, intensifying our housing challenges. Therefore, SNHBA stands in opposition to AB 303 as drafted. However, we look forward to the opportunity to work with the bill sponsor on a thoughtful revision to prevent such added barriers to housing attainability at a time when so many Nevadans are struggling to find affordable housing. Simply put, if a home is too expensive to build, it will be too expensive to buy. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Oh, in Las Vegas, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Anait Baghshetyan. For the record, that is ANA-HIT-BAGHSHETSYAN, and I'm a research assistant at Nevada Policy. Chair Considine, members of the Assembly Committee, Nevada Policy opposes AB 303, which would effectively expand prevailing wage mandates to broadband and telecommunications projects receiving public funding. This projects would obviously receive prevailing wage, which is determined not necessarily by market wages, but by a survey conducted by Nevada Labor Commissioner, which the methodology of which is deeply flawed. As a result, prevailing wages in Nevada are on average 45% higher than any market wages. In 2009 and 2010, taxpayers wasted extra $1 billion in prevailing wage premiums. To paint a picture on a random profession, let's pick fire alarm installer. A fire alarm installer working on a prevailing wage premium would receive $55.95 per hour, whereas the market average determined by the Department of Employment, Training, and Rehabilitation is $24.59. And this pattern is persistent across various professions. You can take a look at the exhibit submitted to the committee earlier yesterday. But for the exact same professions that we're discussing today, the costs would be driven up. But if Nevada truly wants to ensure fair pay and quality job opportunities while expanding its broadband infrastructure efficiently, the solution is not more regulation and artificial wage inflation. The state should instead promote open and competitive bidding, where wages are determined by free market rate rather than dictated by outdated formulas. That is why I urge this committee to oppose AB 303. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in Las Vegas wishing to testify in opposition to AB 303? Seeing no one else approach, AVH, is there anyone on the phone to provide testimony in opposition to AB 303?
To testify in opposition of Assembly Bill 303, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, we have no callers wishing to testify in opposition at this time.
Thank you. We will move to neutral testimony. Is there anyone here in Carson City wishing to testify in neutral on AB 303? Seeing no one, is there anyone in Las Vegas wishing to testify in neutral to AB 303? Seeing no one, AVH, is there anyone on the line for neutral testimony on AB 303?
To testify neutral for Assembly Bill 303, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, we have no callers wishing to testify in neutral at this time.
Thank you. If the presenters would like to make any final remarks?
Thank you, Chair Considine. Venice Karras for the record. I'd like to thank you and Vice Chair Nguyen and all the members of the committee. As you can see, there's a bit of opposition, more than a bit, to this bill, but we are working with all the stakeholders to come to a resolution. Just wanted everyone to realize what they said is true. We are all working diligently, trying to come to an agreeable amendment. So look forward to seeing it. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will now close the hearing on AB 303, and we will move on to the last item on our agenda, which is public comment. As a reminder, members of the public can provide public comment in person or telephonically and may submit public comment up to 24 hours after the meeting. Instructions for providing public comment can be found on the agenda. To provide public comment telephonically, dial 888-475-4499. When prompted to provide the meeting ID, enter 825-2250-1394 and then press pound when prompted for a participant ID. Each person will have 2 minutes to provide testimony, and please remember to clearly state and spell your name for the record. Is there anyone here in Carson City wishing to provide public comment? Seeing no one, is there anyone in Las Vegas? There is no one in Las Vegas. The AVH, is there anyone on the lines for public comment?
To provide public comment, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue.
Good morning, Assembly Woman Considine and Vice Chair Nguyen and members of the committee. My name is Dora Martinez, and I represent the Nevada Disability Action Coalition. Madam Chair, I know that I'm trying to be as proactive as I can, and I'm trying to read the bill, and it's people at the LCB accessibility team are going to help me to make it accessible so I can read it. But I just want to make sure that the public work bill, I was wondering maybe you guys could work on putting safety parameters in the bill. So when there's a construction going on, there is an accessible, like a landmark for people who are visually impaired or blind like myself, who sometimes when it's too hot, my dog rests at home because I don't want his paw to burn, and I use a cane. And I'm speaking on this because of lived experience. Sometimes there are cones around the manhole, and we don't know because I'm totally blind, and I almost fell, but thank God to the good cop who stopped and like stopped me from falling into the manhole. So safety parameters that's more accessible to people who are visually impaired and blind, because we don't have a car and we utilize the sidewalks and the streets. Thank you, Chair. Have a good day.
Thank you, Ms. Martinez. This will not be considered public comment. This is more in opposition to the last bill because you would like to add something. So we will move this to opposition testimony on AB 303. But thank you. AVH, is there any other callers for public comment?
Chair, we have no additional callers on the line.
Thank you. Our next meeting will be on Wednesday, March 12th at 8 a.m. here in room 4100. That concludes our meeting today. The meeting is adjourned.